Are you having a hard time with having tough conversations with your team? Are you stressed out and worried about how the conversation is going to go? I got some tips for you, so keep on listening. Today, we're going to dive into the ways that you can have tough conversations with ease so you have more peace with the conversation. You're clear on what you need to get across, the message that you need to say, and everybody is on the same page. There's a big difference between an exception and a pattern of behavior. You, as the CEO, should be the last stop when it comes to any kind of tough conversation with a patient or a client. And sometimes the person just wants to vent to somebody who they feel can change a situation. Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. This is your one-stop shop to learn the business side of your practice on a deeper level. On this show, we empower you to own your CEO status to scale your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit. Listen in as we talk about how to market your practice to gain more visibility, hire, build, and engage your ride or die dream team, create streamlined operations, and make financial decisions as a CEO. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Let's get started. Oh, tough conversations. But I promise you they can be freeing, especially as we're talking about how you can have more freedom in your practice. And when you actually address what I call the elephant in the room, then it is empowering. It can be powerful. It can definitely set you and your team on the right track, but it can cause some stress. It can make you stay up at night. It can make you cry. It can make you want to, you know what? This crap ain't worth it. I'm shutting it down today. This sucks. I'm done. Who wants to buy my practice? I'm giving it away today. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm coming in, giving you some tips all about how to have tough conversations. So let's start first with maybe some of the conversations that might be lingering in the background. I think the number ones that come up for me and just some of the conversations that I've had with me and, from my leadership and management experience and having team members, I'll say it again, 100 plus, definitely having directors and coordinators and managers and team leads and all the people, clinical providers, admin, billers, marketing, all the stuff. There is a lot that can happen in the day to day, and there's a lot of different types of conversations, not to mention that patients and clients can definitely throw in some doozies your way for maybe tough conversations that you need to have. So there's a lot. The number one thing to remember is to be very clear on the messaging and also not to have these conversations from a state of emotion. So let's go ahead and talk through what are some of the most common type of tough conversations that you could have, whether if it's with a team member, whether if it's with a patient and client. There's so many things that can happen in the day to day where you just have to say it, right? And a lot of times people get consumed with how am I going to say it? Where am I going to say it? Is it what format to say it in? And part of this is you having the clarity. So let's talk about different situations. Let's talk through team first. So, if you are wanting to have a tough conversation with the team, I'm a big proponent of having things typed out or written out for what you want to say and what is the message that you want to get across. There is nothing worse, and I'm speaking from experience where you sit down, have a whole conversation with somebody and nobody's on the same page, right? And there's a lot of times too when you're having these conversations, especially in the beginning, where you might feel nervous, you might be unsure of what to say or how to say it and how to make sure that you're clear. So writing down points that you want to get across, examples for if there's a situation where maybe you have to show proof of something or retrain. And so there's a number of things that you need to have in front of you before you have conversations with your team. Depending on the situation, whether if you're firing somebody, that's a tough conversation. You're writing up somebody, that's a tough conversation. You're giving a verbal warning, that's a tough conversation. You're telling somebody that they're not doing good in their job, that's a tough conversation. You're having to refocus a team member, that's a tough conversation. So all these are tough conversations. And so having that list of what is the outcome that you're trying to get, what are the points that you need to get across, what is the message that needs to be conveyed, and then what are the next steps are very helpful. When you are talking to a patient or client, sometimes you don't know what you're working with, so sometimes you don't know until you get the person on the phone, or if the person is with you face to face, what exactly they're upset about. So depending on how the conversation ends up on your desk, I will say, because I'm talking to practice owners with teams, your admin, your managers, your leaders, like you as the CEO should be the last stop when it comes to any kind of tough conversation with a patient or a client. And it should be where it's like, I've done everything I could probably say. They really just want to talk to you, and don't let your team pass it on to you, like, because they don't want to handle it, and then you're sitting there for an hour talking to a patient. So sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. So try to make sure, especially if you're being brought into the situation, that you're getting every single detail. Why is the person mad? What is the complaint that they might have? Why is the patient wanting to talk to you? Because I'm assuming if it's a tough conversation that you don't want to have, there's probably some type of complaint, whether if it's a bill, whether if it's I don't agree with this diagnosis, whether it's, your team member sucks, whether it's, I'm going to leave you a bad Google review, like all of those can be very challenging things to talk about. So making sure that you have all the details, also making sure that you're looking through any documentation, looking at their history. So do your due diligence and your research before you even pick up the phone or before you even talk to the person. Even if the person's waiting for you in the lobby, it does not matter. Have all your ducks in a row. I'm sure you know this, but just as a reminder, because sometimes we can get busy, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So, in those conversations, the best thing that you can do, especially with a patient and a client, is just listen. Listen. Don't try to dispute. Don't try to insert your opinion. Don't try to, but this person is new, or don't try, just listen, just hear them out. A lot of times I've taken some crazy complaints, and sometimes the person just wants to vent to somebody who they feel can change a situation. So if you listen, 99% of that problem will be solved. Also, it will save you time. So instead of being on the phone with this person for an hour, if you just listen and allow for them to get everything out, and then you can insert the question, what can I do to resolve this situation? And listen to what they say. So they will tell you exactly how to solve the problem. Well, I need for you to know, okay, what do you need for me to know? And what is the solution? Right. So if they ask you, like, well, I want you to refund my whole bill, I mean, they can ask. They can absolutely ask, but then at the same time, you have a choice where you can either compromise with that patient, you can explain to them, well, your insurance company, because a lot of times your insurance company, we cannot do that, or we can do that, or, you can make a choice, but just asking them straight up after they vent, how can we resolve this situation for you? What I already know after I say this statement, I already know that this podcast is probably going to some of your team members, so that way it doesn't end up on your plate. So I would definitely suggest for you to mentor your team on how to have tough conversations as well. So that way they can not pass them on to you. But the number one question I know too that might be, a question that might be pondering is Google reviews. I always get this one, like tough conversation Google reviews. You can get people to take down a Google review if you ask, how can I resolve this situation for you? And on the other side of that, absolutely. I can go ahead and refund your bill. I saw that you left us a Google review. How can we come to a place where, are you open to reviewing, or are you open to removing your Google review? There is nothing in any kind of book whatsoever that does not say that you can't ask someone to take it down. I know from my experience, we have had asked patients to take down bad Google reviews. I've had marketing companies that I've hired who have asked patients to take down Google reviews. And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. And that is okay. That is okay. There are clients that I've worked with where they've just heard patients out, and the patient has volunteered, okay, well, you've solved my problem. I'll go ahead and remove the Google review. So it's more or less of just coming to a place of listening, understanding, and then moving on with your life. So that way, because there's other things that you have to do. So tough conversations don't have to make you spiral. Tough conversations don't have to make you have the worst day ever. Tough conversations can serve as an opportunity to do something different. I always look at, especially since we're talking about patient complaints, all patient complaints are a gift because it allows for you to know exactly where your practice stands. It allows for you to know the opportunities for you to fix things within your practice, whether if it's operationally, whether if it's a certain team member. Sometimes patient complaints can help you get a bad teamer out of your practice. So just appreciating tough conversations in general, I think is helpful. Hey, private practice owner, I have great news. Private Practice CEO is officially open for enrollment. So if you've been sitting at your desk frustrated with the business side of your practice, not too sure what to do about your team dynamic, haven't looked at your numbers in a while, then this program is for you. Inside of Private Practice CEO, we're all about you scaling your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit, making sure that we are setting you up for success. So that way you can leverage your practice. You can have freedom of time in your practice, and you don't have to sit there burned out, frustrated, and overwhelmed because you're not sure what to do next. If any of this sounds great to you, then I want to make sure that you apply today because the program is phenomenal. We have amazing testimonials for practice owners who have been able to have more structure, able to make more money, being able to lead from a place of empowerment, and definitely been able to leverage their practice to go after more. So click the link today. With your team, there is a time and place to have a tough conversation, but if you keep having the same tough conversation over and over and over and over again, then there's probably something different that you need to do. Same thing when it comes to like the patient complaint. If you keep getting the same patient complaint or the same client complaint over and over and over and over again, there's probably something you need to do, right? So there's a big difference between an exception in a pattern of behavior is what I say, because the exception, you have the conversation, you get across the message, hopefully you and the person are on the same page, and then you move on. And hopefully you see a difference. If not, then if you're having the same thing over and over and over again, then it goes back to having a team of accountability, that culture of accountability, and making sure that you're setting yourself up and your team up for success when it comes to having a practice that has a great business culture, a practice that has a great patient experience. And the problem is a lot of times is when people need to have tough conversations, they will put everything in front of the tough conversation in order to either avoid the conversation or because they're nervous to have the conversation. Or when it comes to the patient, you're busy, I didn't have time. So it's like 2 weeks later, and now you're trying to address the situation. So it's important for you to recognize like, is this a one off or is this something that is a true problem that's going to cost you time and money and potentially a reputation, later down the road. So it's always helpful to go ahead, talk it out, get it over and done with, make the time for it, and then move on. The other thing is as you're scaling your practice, the practice you have today is not the practice that you're going to have next year, right? And so a lot of times the team members that you have today, you probably may not have them next year, right? And so it's important for you to recognize, is this conversation doing me a favor? Is this conversation an opportunity for me to open up a new door in order to get to the next level that I'm trying to have at for my practice? There's clients that I have where they will start to have tough conversations with their team, whether if it's with one individual or the whole team or just holding people accountable. And one of the things I always say is be prepared. You are going to turn over your team. And so the right people will always stay, and the right people will find themselves in a situation of having to pick and having to choose. And it happens every single time. So for those of you who are interested in working with me inside of Private Practice CEO and you have a team, you've been avoiding like tough conversations, you've been letting your team kind of just do whatever, and now you're in a place of like, well, this isn't working out. Get ready. So get ready to have tough conversations. So actually there is a guide inside of Private Practice CEO that we make sure that our clients have, that they use as reference when they're having tough conversations. But there is definitely a way to have it. Partner with your team, 110% always partner with your team, hear them out. Listen, same thing as what I was telling you about with the patient. Listen, hear them out, and then at the end of the day, there's always the what works for the practice and then what works for the individual. So be open to compromise, when you're able to compromise and be open to stand your ground when you have to stand your ground. I think that's the big thing when it comes to tough conversations. I'm trying to go through my head as I'm talking through this topic. I'm going through my head and thinking of what are the toughest conversations that I've had managing all the people I've managed and led, 100 plus people. And one story that comes to mind, so let's do a little bit of story time, is a number one fire. She had been with the practice for a really, really long time. And she just like her attendance was awful. She started to come to work. You could tell that something either she was going out the night before or she was coming and she was just off, like off her A game. Documentation ended up being bad. She was slow with bringing back patients. The provider started to complain about her, and it was just time. So I needed to fire her. I had to let her go. During that time, she ended up not agreeing with the decision for us to let her go, but we had already gone through the termination process of verbal warning, written warning, final warning, and now it was termination. And so this was earlier in my management days. And I remember she spit on me. Literally, she spit on me and cussed me out as I was escorting her out of the practice. She cussed me out. She spit on me again, called me she called me a bitch. Um said all the things that she could possibly say to me in a conversation. Rightfully so. I mean, those are her feelings. That's how she felt. She lost her job. Sure, whatever. But that was probably, sometimes these conversations can look a certain way in your head, and sometimes that really does happen. Like it really does. I've had people cry, during tough conversations. I think the number one thing that, especially if you're writing up a team member, is the distraction. Look over here so that way you can't see what I'm doing over here type of. It's like they're trying to do like a magic trick. So I see that a lot. It's not me, it's them, or it's somebody else. Don't look at what I'm doing. Or if they have the same situation, I've had it where team members have told me their grandmother has died, but their grandmother has died prior. There's all kinds of things that can happen in these dynamics. So that's why it's really important to have the agenda, to have clear points, to understand your message, to be very, very clear on, this is why either you need to go or this is why we need to change up the behavior. So inside of private practice CEO, we make sure all of our clients have a how to have hard conversations or how to have tough conversations guide. In addition to that, the coaching that they get with that is we sometimes will role play. We go through what potential scenarios that could happen, potential responses. We also talk through just the clarity that you might need for, am I feeling some kind of way? Like, am I being too micromanaging is what I hear. And we talk through all of it, right? And so sometimes having like the outside perspective is so helpful when you are having these conversations. And also, as you're scaling your practice, I'll be completely honest, sometimes we're being very strategic about how you're having the tough conversations. So that way the team member doesn't necessarily quit. Um, and then we can tweak it again when we're at a place where we need for that team member, you know, to quit. So there's all kinds of different ways when it comes to tough conversations and the strategy that goes behind it. And so that's something that we definitely do dig into more inside a private practice CEO, because there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place just to be honest and real in what's in alignment for you, what's in alignment for the person that you're talking to when it comes to the practice. And then there's a time and place for, own what the practice needs, and the accountability pieces is definitely something that can trip people up. So if you're in a place of struggling with these types of conversations, please know you're not alone by any means. Everybody can definitely go back to a time where they're having a tough conversation, or feeling nervous about having a tough conversation and not necessarily wanting to dive into, oh yeah, let's have tough conversations. Let's go ahead and make someone upset, or let's go ahead and make someone cry, or let's go ahead and make me, not sleep tonight. Nobody wants to put themselves in that situation. Nobody. So, but at the end of the day, as a CEO, that's what you have to do. I mean, you have to, like, somebody has to do it. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you. Again, I have a feeling, especially how to handle the patient complaints. This one, go ahead, pass this one on to your admin team. pass it on to any kind of leadership team that you have. So that way these types of conversations can not necessarily all be done by you, just to make sure that you're set up for success. So I will see you guys next time. Bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.